Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tiny Blue Games. My name, of course, is Seesaw or Chris, and today we're going to get to know each other a bit better. We're going to share our MMO history. That's right, the line of games that you played to eventually get to where you are right now. We each have a bit of a unique line of games, and a lot of us probably have a bit of overlap, and I'd love to talk about that. So I'm going to start by sharing my MMO history, and then if you want to share yours in the comments, I'd love to discuss it. But let's get right to it. The very first MMO I ever played was MapleStory, the side-scrolling animated game that I'm sure a lot of people have at least heard of, but most people have played it at least once sometime in, their lifetime. And I played it back in 2006 when I was about 11, and it was, like I say, my first MMO, so how big the world was and how many people I could interact with really blew me away. And I absolutely fell in love with the game and played it for 3 to 4 years solidly, just really exploring everything, taking a long time to level. I think my main character at the time, or at least for most of that time, was a dexless assassin, which isn't a thing anymore in MapleStory, but a dexless assassin. So I'd throw throwing stars at enemies, and it was just so much fun to explore the game and take your time leveling. I've never had a game that I've been so interested in just leveling my character. The idea of, getting a bit of XP grinding was so exhilarating at time, and I loved it. The party quests, the events there would be, the updates, the festivals. It was a really good game back then, and it was one of the best ways I think I could ever start my MMO history. From MapleStory, I moved on to Fiesta, which was the first 3D MMORPG I ever played, which was a pretty big thing because I'd played MapleStory for about 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years, and it was all 2D, and that's kind of the only game I thought was online at that point. I don't know why I thought that. I just never thought to go exploring for different games through Google or anything like that. My friend had just introduced me to MapleStory, and I stuck to MapleStory. But then I got curious, and I started looking around, and I found Fiesta, which was kind of like MapleStory. It had classes, it had different monsters you could kill, and it had sort of a party quest kind of idea. But it was 3D, so hell, I gave it a try, and I loved it. I played an archer. Graphically right now, it's crap, but it's still online, and it's still fun to play. The biggest thing for me, which was really exciting, was that you could enhance your weapons, much like scrolling in MapleStory, except at this time, the weapons would actually glow, and that was the coolest thing in the world for me, just to be walking around with a glowing weapon, showing how powerful you were to people. And I think that was really the first taste of, in-game cosmetic progression that I really got, which would become, obviously a big staple of many MMOs in the future that I'd play. But it was a really fun game, and it's impressive that it's still online today. Somewhere in 2008, I moved from Fiesta to Cabal. Cabal. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I was a child when I played it, and I still haven't learned how to pronounce the name, apparently. But it was another MMORPG that was 3D, which was super cool. But this one had more mature graphics, which was great because I was a growing boy who was interested in more impressive graphics, I guess, even though today the graphics are still laughable. But that's, the games that we play right now are going to be laughable in 10 years as well. So what can we really say? But the game itself was very enjoyable. It was, once again, more grinding and stuff like MapleStory that I loved, but this game introduced really cool gear. Like, the armor that you could wear was super cool and super detailed, I thought, and was just the coolest thing you could wear. The weapons, the armor, and then the actual skill animations were much more extreme than MapleStory and Fiesta, and just being able to preview the skills that you could get in the future really gave a goal to play for. I was playing for the gear and the skills that you could get eventually. There was no other progression that I needed at that time. It was enough just to know how cool I would be eventually. And that's when I started watching YouTube videos on the game as well, trying to see what the skills would look like. And it really opened up the world of YouTube gaming for me as well. In 2009, I finally convinced my parents to pay $15 a month to play World of Warcraft. This was probably the biggest gaming step for myself, and probably many other gamers, where we were so invested into the game financially, even though it wasn't maybe our own finances, or maybe it was, maybe we got a summer job or something specifically to play World of Warcraft, but this was big. It was an impressive game compared to anything else that I had ever played. And this was at the about a year from the end of Wrath of the Lich King, when WoW's popularity had peaked. It was, the 12 million subscribers, the biggest time to be playing World of Warcraft, the most epic game online ever at this point in time. And I was a part of it. I was in the Icecrown Citadel raid, exploring the Lich King's lair. It was huge, and I was immersed in this game, much like I was for MapleStory. But this is where I experienced raiding, dungeons, questing traditionally. This is where I got all the core staples of a theme park MMO, and I loved it. I absolutely adored playing the game. My main at the time was a protection paladin, so I was a tank for most raids, and I felt so important arriving there and being the person who had to take the damage from the bosses, to taunt them off the damage dealers. I felt very important, and I loved that feeling whenever I showed up, either for a pickup group or for a guild group. Even if they weren't great runs, it was really fun to be a part of that community. And I stayed playing that game solidly all the way to the end of Wrath of the Lich King and all the way through Cataclysm, which was also a pretty good expansion, compared to some of the other ones we had right after that. I left World of Warcraft right before Mist of Pandaria was to release. I wasn't, very excited for what Mist of Pandaria was going to bring, even though I'd heard it, didn't turn out to be that bad of an expansion. I just wasn't super pumped for it. But more importantly, I had been hearing and seeing advertisements for Rift, which was a WoW-like game in a lot of senses, but added some unique story and a bit different graphics to the game, and it was enough to draw me into the game. And this is back when Rift also had a monthly subscription fee, and was posed to be, a WoW killer of sorts, is what they kind of released themselves as. And I got on that bandwagon. I tried it. It was a really fun game as well. It fulfilled a lot of the main ideas that World of Warcraft had and a lot of the main, desires I had as a gamer. And I played that game probably for a year off and on. It never truly sunk in as much as World of Warcraft did, maybe because World of Warcraft was my first MMO like that, and I was looking back at a lot of the things that WoW had to offer nostalgically, and in my mind Rift never quite fulfilled on the same level, and that's maybe why I decided to move on from it eventually. Then I heard about Guild Wars 2. This game was supposed to flip the entire MMO market on its head. It was supposed to revolutionize how gaming online was, how you worked with people, how quests were given, how endgame was going to be, progressed. It was supposed to be a huge changer in the MMO market, and I was excited about it. This was the first game I ever played the beta for, and getting to experience them actually working on the game throughout beta and being some of the new players getting to try the game right from release was extremely exciting for me, and I'd never been more invested in into the future of a game before. And Guild Wars 2 delivered on a lot of those aspects. I'd never played the original Guild Wars, and because of that, I was learning a lot of the lore. I was watching videos online about Guild Wars 1 lore in preparation for Guild Wars 2. And then the game finally launched, and it was extremely exciting. The leveling process, the characters, the classes, it was so much fun to play the game and really experience all the dungeons they had to offer, all the different equipment, the legendary weapons weapons that were so beautiful that, they surpassed anything any game had ever offered me before, and I was just taken away by it. But there was something missing in the game early on, and a lot of players knew this who did join the game from games like World of Warcraft. The end game just didn't have enough to offer to keep people consistently engaged in it. And that was something Guild Wars 2 struggled with, and I eventually left the game because of that. That I just didn't have the raiding scene that I wanted, the dungeon scene that I wanted. They didn't add the endgame content that I had hoped for. And I don't know if it was just that I was comparing it to World of Warcraft, which had been out for so much longer and had time to develop these systems. But for me, Guild Wars 2's endgame had fallen flat, despite the rest of the game being so good. One of the other reasons I did leave Guild Wars 2 was because I had heard rumors of this mythical game that was supposed to be the end of MMORPGs as we knew it, to be the new WoW, the WoW killer, the next big thing, and it was called Wildstar. This game was supposed to deliver endgame content that hardcore players missed from World of Warcraft, that, Guild Wars 2 wasn't delivering. It was supposed to fulfill us gamers who desired that. And it was marketed that way. It was supposed to be the next huge thing. The issue was this game, still was in development and it wasn't going to be released for a while. So I found myself in this first period of time, which was about a year or two, where I had to wait for this game I was super excited for and play some games in between. Now, the games I played in between were good games. I just knew that they wouldn't be, the games I ended up playing for a really long time because I knew once Wildstar came out, I was going to be heading there. But it made a pretty good part of my MMO history, and it offered experiences that I'd never had before. The first of these filler games that I played was Dragon's Nest, and this isn't a true MMO in the sense it's not an open world and it's very instance-based gameplay, but its combat was so fun, and just the skills you had brought me back to MapleStory. A lot of reasons because of how cartoony it was, but also how focused it was on the next skills I'd get, leveling my character. I just really fell in love with this game as something I could do very easily and have fun doing by myself. And I think that was one of the biggest selling features for it, was that I could just play it by myself. I could grind how I used to grind in MapleStory and just really level up the characters and classes I wanted to see. Eventually, I moved from Dragon's Nest to Vindictus, which was a game that was very similar to Dragon's Nest. It pretty much played exactly the same way. It was, very instance-based, dungeons, core classes that you would just level up, and you could go into dungeons together as well, which Dragon's Nest offered. But this game had higher quality graphics and was just a more mature version of Dragon's Nest. It was exactly what had happened, moving from Fiesta to Cabal. I moved from Dragon's Nest to Vindictus, and I played Vindictus for a while as well. It was, fun to learn the game, learn all the new classes and stuff like that, but eventually running dungeons over and over again got stale, and I kind of found that although I enjoyed the idea of running these instances and grinding that way, I knew that it wasn't sustaining, and I was getting closer to the release of Wildstar. I just had to wait a little bit longer, so I was growing impatient at this point in time. The final game I turned to before playing Wildstar was Neverwinter. And this was a very interesting game to me because it was more of a traditional MMO, despite being a bit different, but was very focused on Dungeons & Dragons, obviously. I had never played Dungeons & Dragons, but I understood that there was a lot of background lore, and this offered a lot of things to read up on and learn about the game, which was something I needed to really distract myself at that time. On top of this, the game offered some very good combat, in my particular opinion. I actually really enjoyed how the combat felt, how the classes felt. There was some PvP that could be done and some dungeons, which were great. And, just higher level instance content as well. So it did scratch a lot of the itches I needed. Now, there was flaws with the game and certain things I didn't like about it. So I knew I couldn't continue to play this game forever, but it was the perfect game to sort of play while I was waiting for things. And it's a game that I've gone back to every so often when they've added new contents, new expansions, because the game is very actively developed and they add new classes to the game. It's a very interesting thing to go check out every so often, but it wasn't a game that I had much sticking power with. I think just because despite the, lore being very interesting, I never fell deeply in love with the lore. And because of that, the game felt like I was just playing it mostly for the fun and combat of it, which is fun, but it wasn't engaging enough for me to stick with it. Finally, in the summer of 2014, Wildstar was released. And this was huge. I'd played the betas, I'd read everything I knew about the game, watched videos for all the races, all the classes. I knew absolutely everything about the game. I knew exactly what character class I wanted to make. I had all my friends organize what they wanted to make so we could run dungeons together. It was going to be huge. And to be fair, the summer of 2014 was huge. The game saw a humongous population for the first 3 months of its gameplay. Lots of people in the starting zones, lots of huge guilds came from WoW to play it and really loved the dungeons and the raids. But we all know that's not exactly the end of the story for Wildstar. because slowly, come fall, the game started to die. A bit slow at first and then fast. People left the game, guilds left to go back to WoW. They realized the game was not exactly what they wanted. It was not going to be the next big MMO. And a lot of the reason this had happened is because gamers didn't know what they wanted. They thought they wanted the hardcore. They thought they wanted the 40-man raids with huge pre-quests and attunement process to get into those raids. But they actually didn't. They had grown up. They had commitments. They couldn't sustain that lifestyle that they had back when they played vanilla WoW. It wasn't possible for them to do it. And, you know, some people did have that, but it wasn't enough to keep the game thriving. And slowly Wildstar began to lose population. Now, don't get me wrong. The game is not dead, or as dead as people say it is. The game's still fairly active and still has updates. It's 2 years now since it launched? 3 years almost. And I still play the game. I still love what the game has to offer. I think there's things in Wildstar that you can do that you can't do anywhere else. And because of that, it's a game that I'm going to always have on my computer and I'm always going to return to and make content for. I love the game. So I am disappointed it didn't become the next biggest game ever. But do I think it was a failure, and do I think that I'm, disappointed by how things turned out? No, I still like the game. I still think it's great, but I did move on to other things on the side of that. The last MMO that I've tried so far, and I say so far because I know there's going to be future MMOs that I want to play. I mean, who's not excited for Ashes of Creation? But for now, the last MMO I've tried so far is Black Desert Online, and I tried it because, well, a lot of my subscribers were telling me, hey, you have to try this game, but even online, you see people raving about the game and the world it offers. So I was like, hell, let's give it a try, and it is a really good game. Now, it doesn't offer the traditional raids or instance content at the end of the game, and because of that, I know it could never be my primary MMO. That's what I've got Guild Wars 2 for, but it offers that grinding and exploring and leveling experience that I've missed so much from games like MapleStory. It's a beautiful world where you can go and fight different monsters, get gear, become more powerful as you level, and the combat itself is enough to warrant trying the game. So I am very happy to keep it on my computer and play it whenever I feel like just grinding some monsters aimlessly. Maybe doing it while I listen to music or watch some TV or something like that. It's a very fun game that offers something that a lot of other games don't. And because of that, I think it's definitely worth talking about. Well, there you guys go. That's my MMO history, and what a history it was. I'm very excited about all the games I played, and to tell you the truth, being able to go back and play all these games to make this video has been a lot of fun. I've been able to step back into some games that I hadn't played in years and years and years. And it's really opened my eyes to the fact that all these games that I've just mentioned, you can actually go back and play right now if you want to try it out. I mean, hell, everyone goes back to MapleStory ever so often, even though it's not at all as good as it used to be. It's still a fun game to relive those childhood memories in. But in terms of what I play now, well, I play mostly Guild Wars 2, Wildstar, and some Black Desert Online, but I'm always exploring different games. I mean, anyone who's a subscriber on this channel knows that you can find a different game that I'm trying out for the first time ever on this channel at any point in time, and I think that's the best part of being an MMO player or an online game player, is that you go and explore and learn new games and you come back to your old favorites. That's really what gaming's all about. So with that in mind, guys, I'd love for you guys to share your own MMO history in the comments below. List out your favorite games, list out what games you've played. I mean, obviously I've left out some huge games for people. I mean, I'd never even played RuneScape ever, which I know for some people was their MMO history. That was the big turning point for them, like MapleStory was for me. So go ahead and tell me about all the games I missed or all the games that you played that I played. I'd love to hear about all of it. And until next time, guys, thanks for watching this video. It means a lot to me if you could leave a like and, hell, subscribe if you want to see any videos on any of these games or any of the games that I might never have played, because I'm always looking for new things to do. But thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.